Hello and welcome to Business 360. I'm Shireen Bhan. The headlines that we're tracking for you this evening. The sensex and the Nifty gain for the fifth straight session, the longest winning streak in a month. The Nifty reclaims 24,000. The Nifty Bank hits a record high. Gold continues to rally as prices hit another record. Weak dollar, ECB's rate cut and President Trump ordering a probe on all critical mineral imports spark more safe haven buying. The price of 10 grams of gold in India now above 1 lakh rupees, including GST and making charges. US Vice President JD Vance and his family begin a 3-day India visit at the Akshardham Temple in Delhi. Prime Minister Modi will host a dinner later this evening. Vance will make an address in Jaipur tomorrow, where he's likely to make policy statements on the Indo-US ties. Finance Minister Nirmala Sitharaman is hopeful of a trade deal with the US in the incoming months as she begins her 5-day visit to the US. India's team, led by the new chief trade negotiator Rajesh Agrawal, will hold talks with US counterparts to sort out pending issues. Both sides have finalized the terms of reference, covering 19 chapters of the proposed bilateral trade agreement. China warns countries against striking a trade deal with the US at the expense of Beijing. Chinese Commerce Ministry threatens countermeasures in a resolute and reciprocal manner. A bureaucratic reshuffle at the Finance Ministry amidst hectic trade negotiations. Arvind Srivastava, who was working with the Prime Minister's office, is appointed the new Revenue Secretary. Wum Lun Mangwal Nam moves from Civil Aviation to become the new Expenditure Secretary. Pope Francis dies at the age of 88 after a prolonged illness, the first person from Latin America to be anointed as the head of the Catholic Church. Pope Francis was known for his social justice advocacy, his calls for reforms within the Church and his environmental activism. Finance veteran KV Kamath says banks need to cut their operational cost to 1/4 of current levels just to survive. Kamath predicts banks will end up providing only retail loans in the long run, with the market providing corporate and infra financing. That's a money control exclusive. Rohit Sharma, Virat Kohli, Jasprit Bumrah and Ravindra Jadeja get contracts from the BCCI. Rishabh Pant promoted Shreyas Iyer and Ishan Kishan make a comeback as 34 players get new retainers. Well, let's start with the day's trading action. After a long weekend, Dalal Street came back to trading day with a bang, gaining for the fifth straight day. It's the longest winning streak in a month. The Nifty reclaiming the 24,000 marks, and banks led from the front, with the Nifty Bank hitting a record high. It's almost a 2% rally there on the Nifty Bank, a new record for that, a percent higher on the Nifty, reclaiming 24,000, and the sensex up by about 855 points. Mid-caps did also outperform. Prashant standing by to wrap up the trading action. Prashant, looking strong as we start the trading session.
Well, a strong day once again as we start a full week of trading. I mean, last 2 weeks we've seen massive gains from the lows, of course. Nifty's added about 2,000 points. And today, if there's any indication, there's no signs of stopping. Bulls are back and back strongly, especially large caps. And of course, I mean, foreign buying at the margin is back as well, which has been very evident over the last 4-5 trading sessions now. So the Nifty past 24,100, the Nifty Bank making a new all-time high. Mid caps and small caps, which lagged a little bit last week, participating very strongly today. I'll start with what was up in terms of the Nifty. Tech Mahindra was a big one, went up. And by the way, Infi was not a great number, but the Infosys stock itself was it closed higher, but other IT stocks did much better. Of course, I mean, the Nifty IT index is down 25%, maybe a little less now after today's gains for the year so far. IndusInd Bank continues its journey. I mean, 15% last week, another 4% today. Trent was up 4%, Hero MotoCorp 4%, Power Grid 3.5%, Bajaj Finserv, Mahindra and Bajaj Auto were some of the other names which were up and about. Only 3 noticeable losers: Adani Ports, HDFC Life and HUL, which were down about 1% plus. In terms of broader market, lots of winners. And I'll just outline some. BSE was the big one, 6%. But the capital markets play, BSE, K Fintech, Novama, 361, Angel One. I mean, that entire pack was a buzz today, top performing sector. Tata Elxsi, 9% numbers again were poor. But I mean, of course, there was, I guess, a lot of covering and some buying as well. Just Dial, big one, 12% back by volume. Suzlon was up 10%. Atul Limited, about 4.5%. Sterling Wilson Solar continues its gains off the lows from last week. You had Vijaya Bank, Aavas Financiers, J&K Bank, Spandana Spurti, All Cargo Logistics up 6% and many more. So decent day, very decent day for the broader markets as well. In terms of what was down, Kirin Industries down 4%, Marico was down about 3%, and a name like Avanti Feed was down about 5% as well. But can't complain because, the repair and recovery over the last 2 weeks has continued as we begin, as I said, this new week. Back to you.
Thanks very much, Prashant. Repair and recovery there as far as the stock markets are concerned, but it continues to be a frenetic rally for gold. Gold rallying with the yellow metal hitting another record high. A faltering dollar and worries of a global economic slowdown have kept safe haven bullion in demand. Manisha standing by. Manisha, the gold gallop continues clearly.
Well, thank you for that. Those numbers on your screens are absolutely all-time highs for the global and the Indian markets as well. So we've done an all-time high of $3395 an ounce in the international markets. For the Indian markets, until now, it has been $96,850. So rupees per 10 grams. So, well, absolutely running, making newer highs in every time zone. Asia started higher, Europe has followed in. And if the US were to follow the same suit, you could be looking at much higher prices beyond $3,400 an ounce as well. Well, the support in gold prices comes in from the fact that you are looking at uncertainty in the global markets. Well, that actually is a calculation on what really you would be paying in sense of gold prices in India. These are the prices which are not inclusive of GST and making charges. Once you start adding all of that, we are almost at 1,10,000 rupees per 10 grams for the Indian markets. If you were stepping out to buy gold today per 10 grams, whether it was a coin or jewelry, you'll be paying much higher than 1,00,000 rupees per 10 grams already. And the expectation is that with the kind of scenario that we are working with in the international markets, whether it is about the dollar index, which is trading at a 3-year lows at or below 99 right now, is a supportive factor. And then apart from that, Trump ordering investigations on critical mineral imports, or whether it has been about a statement of not being very happy with the US Fed Chairman Powell and a statement also of firing him. So these uncertainties clearly are adding premium, and a safe haven buying is happening only in gold, and none of the other asset classes has been supportive for the gold prices as well. So $3,400 an ounce, almost done. The banks and brokerages are keeping on and reiterating their higher targets in sense of gold there. Deutsche Bank has talked about 3,700. Goldman Sachs upped their forecast to $37,000 and $4,000 an ounce as well in this year, if the current situation persists or there is more extremities coming in there. And then you have Bank of America, Citi, UBS also talking at levels of 3,350 to 3,500 on the higher side. Swiss Capital has talked about 3,500. SD Bullion has spoken about 3,500 in the month of April to May itself. So, well, very, very bullish cues continuing.
Yes, clearly the rally there continuing. Manisha, many thanks. And speaking of Trump, his deputy JD Vance, the Vice President of the United States, in Delhi for a 3-day India visit. Well, US Vice President JD Vance starting his trip to India. He is the senior-most leader from the US government to fly down to India since Donald Trump took oath as president this January. Now, Vance's visit comes on the backdrop of the tariff war and negotiations between both countries to seal a bilateral trade deal. Prime Minister Modi will host a dinner for the Vice President later this evening. Now, Vance will make an address in Jaipur tomorrow, where he's likely to make policy statements on current Indo-US ties. The US Vice President has been accompanied by his wife Usha and their 3 children, who were seen in traditional Indian attire. They were received by Union Minister Ashwini Vaishnav at the Palam Air Base in New Delhi. Later, JD Vance and family will have visited the Akshardham temple in the capital and spent nearly an hour there. Parikshit is standing by to take us through what is on the itinerary. Parikshit, JD Vance will call on the Prime Minister later this evening. What are some of the issues that are likely to be up for discussion?
Well, trade and tariffs could take center stage when Prime Minister Modi meets JD Vance at his residence. This is going to be an official meeting, possibly will last for about 30 to 35 minutes. And we do believe that somewhere both sides will express an intent or a request to resolve all outstanding issues at the earliest. At this level, you don't expect the leaders to go into nitty-gritties, but somehow there would be discussions on how we can move beyond the differences on the trade front and have an interim trade deal at the earliest. Our understanding is, and we learn from sources privy to the trade talks, that the Indian side has agreed to reduce the average tariff rate from somewhere around 13.5% to 10% all across the product lines, but US is seeking zero tariffs. So will there be a compromise? That remains to be seen. Will India reduce barriers on agriculture and dairy? That remains to be seen as well. But both sides are expected to express their sensitivities and somehow say that let's move on and have a trade deal soon that can mutually benefit both nations. Having said that, discussions on immigration, discussions on defense acquisitions, energy, startups, space, these are some of the issues that are going to crop up in discussions. Russia-Ukraine war, the war in Gaza, definitely up for discussion, and India will also give its view on these subjects. China will be a big point of discussion. The US has imposed an almost 245% tariff on certain Chinese products, and Vance is expected to give his rationale on reciprocal tariffs to Prime Minister Narendra Modi, and both sides are likely to align foreign policy views on China as well. Thereafter, he will be going to Jaipur, where he'll visit Amer Fort. That's a personal visit with his family. In the afternoon, he gives a speech at the Rajasthan International Centre and goes to the Taj Mahal in Agra on day 3, following which he heads back to the United States. So it's an official trip in one sense, but there is a lot of personal element to the visit as well.
Well, Parikshit, many thanks for joining us. And let's stick with the official, because Finance Minister Nirmala Sitharaman is in the US on a 5-day visit. The Finance Minister addressed the Indian diaspora in San Francisco, where she expressed hope in being able to achieve a bilateral trade deal with the US in the coming months. Both sides have finalized the terms of reference covering 19 chapters of the proposed bilateral trade agreement. Here's the Finance Minister in San Francisco.
Keenness with which we are engaging with the US administration, even as I talk, I think the Vice President of the United States of America is in India. He will be engaging with the Prime Minister hopefully this evening or tomorrow. In between all this, the additional USTR had visited India to see the progress or to engage with the negotiating team who's dealing with the tariff-related negotiation and with the bilateral trade agreement that we want to sign. In fact, the progress of the agreement or the trade agreement that we are working on, at least a first tranche, is something which we hope to conclude by the fall this year.
Well, that is the Finance Minister in the US. As trade talks between India and the US progress, India has announced that IAS officer Rajesh Agrawal will take over as the next Commerce Secretary in October. He's currently the Additional Secretary in the Department of Commerce. A team led by Agrawal will hold negotiations in Washington this week to iron out differences in striking a bilateral trade agreement. Abhimanyu joins us now with more. Abhimanyu, what can we expect this week as talks restart?
India's negotiating team is set to visit the United States this week to sort out pending issues before launching negotiations for a bilateral trade agreement between both the countries. Led by Chief Negotiator Rajesh Agrawal, who's an additional secretary with the Department of Commerce, the team will speak to its American counterparts for 3 days starting 23rd April. Sources have told CNBC TV 18 that India and the US have finalized terms of reference covering 19 chapters for a proposed BTA covering issues of tariffs, goods, non-tariff barriers, customs facilitation, rules of origin and regulations. For a proposed FTA between India and the UK, the talks are moving towards final stages, with the sticking point being the issue of resolution of disputes between both the countries. Another full round of negotiations is unlikely as discussions are progressing at a fast pace between India and the UK. With the EU, India is discussing an early harvest agreement. The 11th round of India-EU FTA talks are slated to take place in New Delhi from the 12th to 16th of May. It remains to be seen how all these talks are going to pan out, even as the pause on reciprocal tariffs by the United States continues.
All right, Abhimanyu, many thanks for joining us. Amidst all the trade negotiations and tariff tensions, we now have a new team in North Block, which is the Finance Ministry, after a major bureaucratic reshuffle over the weekend. Timsy standing by to give us the details. Timsy, take us through what has changed in the Finance Ministry. Take us through the new team that Nirmala Sitharaman is going to work with.
Well, these changes have been awaited for a while. The Finance Ministry has a slew of new faces who will take charge of the government's many economic and developmental policies. Arvind Srivastava, a senior IAS officer from Karnataka cadre, has been named Revenue Secretary. He is an officer from 1994 batch and was serving in the PMO as Additional Secretary. V. Wolnam, who has been serving as Civil Aviation Secretary, is new Expenditure Secretary. This 1992 batch Manipur cadre officer will take over from Manoj Govil, who will assume charge as Secretary Coordination at the Cabinet Secretariat. After a long gap, we now have a female secretary in the Finance Ministry too. Anuradha Thakur, an IAS officer from again 94 batch of Himachal Pradesh cadre, will move from the Ministry of Corporate Affairs, where she was serving as an officer in the additional secretary rank, and now she'll take over immediately as officer on special duty in Department of Economic Affairs. She will take over as DA Secretary from current DA Secretary Ajay Seth upon his superannuation on the 30th of June 2025. Department of Public Enterprises, that is DPE, will also get a new face. Moises Chailai, presently Secretary of Interstate Council Secretariat in the Ministry of Home Affairs, will take over from Arunish Chawla. Secretary Deepam Chawla was also holding additional charge in the Ministry of Culture and DPE. The Ministry of Commerce and Industry will also see a new bureaucrat later this year. Rajesh Agarwal, a Manipur cadre officer from 1994 batch, who is currently serving as Additional Secretary again in the Commerce Ministry, has been elevated to Special Secretary, and he will become the next Commerce Secretary when Sunil Barthwal, the current Secretary, superannuates on 30th September 2025. Important to note that Agarwal is also the chief negotiator for the ongoing India-US trade deal talks. The Central Board of Direct Taxes also has 4 new faces: Pankaj Kumar Mishra, Sanjay Bahadur, L. Rajashekar Reddy and G. Aparna Rao. All revenue service officers of the IT cadre from 1989 batch will join the board.
Timsy, many thanks. Now, President Trump is registering the worst economic approval numbers of his presidential career. According to a CNBC economic survey, 43% people polled approved of his handling of the economy, 55% disapproved. This is the first time in any CNBC poll that Trump's rating has been net negative on the economy, while President overall, 44% of the respondents approved of Trump's handling of the presidency so far, 51% disapproved. This is slightly better than the final reading of the CNBC survey when Trump left office in 2020. Now, China has warned it will retaliate against countries that negotiate trade deals with the U.S. at its expense. The Chinese Commerce Ministry, in a statement, has threatened countermeasures in a resolute and reciprocal manner. China has also accused the U.S. of abusing tariffs and bullying countries around the world. It promised to defend international fairness in trade and promised to strengthen solidarity with all parties. Pope Francis, the head of the Roman Catholic Church, passed away at the age of 88 after battling a severe respiratory illness. The first person from Latin America to be elected the head of the Catholic Church, Pope Francis was known for his social justice advocacy, his calls for reforms within the Church, and his environmental activism. Born as Jorge Mario Bergoglio, he was a hope of many firsts. The first from the Jesuit order, the first to take the name Francis, and the first in almost 6 centuries to become the Pope, following the resignation of his predecessor, Pope Benedict. Crowds gathered at the Vatican Square to pay tribute to the Pope. Leaders from across the world have hailed Pope Francis's legacy. Prime Minister Modi, in a tweet, said that Pope Francis will always be remembered as a beacon of courage, humility, and spiritual courage by millions across the world. The papal conclave to elect the next Pope should be convened in the next 2 to 3 weeks. And other international news, Israeli forces have killed at least 39 people in Gaza over the last 24 hours, taking the death toll from 18 months of war to over 51,000. That's as per the Gaza Health Ministry. Meanwhile, the Israeli military has said that professional failures led to the killing of 15 Palestinian medics in Gaza last month. An inquiry into the incident by the Israeli Defense Forces found a series of failings, including an operational misunderstanding and breach of orders. The deputy commander of the unit involved has now been dismissed. Russia launched an attack in Ukraine just hours after President Vladimir Putin's one-day ceasefire came into an end. That was a ceasefire for Easter. As per the Ukrainian Air Force, Russia launched as many as 96 missiles and 3 drones in overnight attacks targeting 3 regions in Ukraine, including Kharkiv. Ukraine claimed its air defense unit shot down 42 Russian drones, while another 47 drones were redirected by electronic warfare. We will head into a break, but up next, finance veteran KV Kamath says banks need to cut their operational cost to 1/4 of the current levels just to be able to survive. An exclusive coming up. Eversource Capital is set to be in advanced talks to acquire ride-hailing startup BlueSmart. Sources tell CNBC TV 18 the company has made a non-binding offer to acquire BlueSmart for 850 crore rupees. Sources add that BlueSmart's co-founders Anmol Jaggi and Puneet Singh Jaggi may be asked to step down from their role on the company's board as part of any potential deal. A final announcement could be made within the next 2 weeks. Remember, BlueSmart has already suspended operations in several cities. This comes at a time when the Jaggi brothers, who are promoters of Gensol Engineering, face a SEBI probe over alleged fund diversion. As per sources, the Ministry of Corporate Affairs has also launched a suo motu investigation into alleged irregularities at Gensol. It will examine the company's regulatory filings and accounts. On to a money control exclusive. Finance veteran KV Kamath says banks need to cut their operational cost to 1/4 of the current levels just to be able to survive. In a conversation with CNBC TV 18's Lata Venkatesh, Kamath predicted that banks would end up providing only retail loans in the long run, with the market providing corporate and infra financing.
Challenge that banks will face, are facing and will face, is cost to income ratio. So unless you disrupt that cost to income ratio to 1/4 of what it is today, you won't survive. 1/4. I'm saying if you cannot operate, you will have to be well below the 35-40% people are.
No, ICICI and HDFC
and some people are higher than that. Banks, I think, as they evolve, the larger and larger part will be to the retail sector, because they are, as of now, best equipped, unless they're disrupted by a fintech. The corporates, large part of the corporate universe today, are cash positive. The cash flows are positive and can meet most of their growth needs. At the margin, they may have to borrow. Large part of infrastructure funding will come through a market process, which is outside the banking system. It's already happening.
That's KV Kamath. Now, the government has remained silent on MTNL's rising defaults, which now stand at 8,346 crore rupees. In fact, the firm's operations are being managed now by BSNL under a service arrangement. Sapna standing by with more. Sapna, take us through the details and where MTNL finds itself today.
Well, definitely it has been a very long road, especially also for all those banks, because MTNL continues to be, continues to be an NPA account, so to speak. So if you look at the latest regulatory filing, well, the default amount has actually gone up by around 69 crores. So around 8,346 crores is what MTNL basically owes to banks. And having said that, despite queries across the board, we have not got any suitable response from government officials as to what needs to be done regarding the NPA status of MTNL. However, what we have been given to understand, and this is through also conversations that we have had in the past with government officials, is the fact that there is no fiscal package as such that we can talk about in terms of rescuing MTNL, so to say. Sorry, pardon me. That's one. However, asset monetization is what the government has agreed upon. That's the second element. And third, very importantly, which you have pointed out, is basically BSNL taking over day-to-day operations of MTNL. I think that has already happened from Jan 1 onwards. So that is basically going to help the company stay afloat, so to speak. But the fact also remains that 8,346 crores worth of bad loans are still sticking out, and we have to wait and watch and see the space for more on MTNL.
All right, Sapna, appreciate you joining us. That's the latest there as far as MTNL is concerned. And with that, it is time for us to wrap up this edition of Business 360. The news will continue right here on CNBC TV 18. Stay tuned. We're back in a moment with more.